have anything to read or
No, there's nothing.
minutes or anything?
There were minutes in the packet, but we're all out of practice of printing them out and bringing them to this.
Anyway, you've got draft minutes. If you'd like, I can read them aloud to you, but hopefully you read them at home.
You got them? You can just read your copy.
Oh.
Oh, that's.
Oh,
So yes, you should probably read them.
okay.
At least paraphrase or
All right,
something.
present, everyone was, no, Jackie was not there. Everyone else was there. And also present was Max Shipuk, who was the applicant for the two parcel partitioning. The minutes from June 28th were approved as presented. Chairman Lewis opened the hearing. I recited the opening statement. No objection to notice of the hearing. No declarations of conflict of interest or bias. Richard Lewis noted he visited the site. I introduced the application as a request. There were no questions. The applicant had nothing to add. Staff recommendation was to approve. Hazel moved to approve. Ellard seconded. It was approved 4-0. There was no other business. The meeting was adjourned at 7:13.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have approved the minutes of our last meeting.
Okay. I placed two items on the agenda for tonight. One is to discuss a possible amendment to the land use code regarding accessory dwelling units. This came up because I got an inquiry from someone who has a single-family house in the high-density residential zone, who wanted to put an ADU in the backyard. And I looked at the code, and lo and behold, 2 or 3 years ago, when we wrote the ADU standards, we said that any single-family home in the low-density or medium-density zone can have an ADU. And I assume that we wrote it that way because there's not supposed to be single-family homes in the high-density zone. But in looking at the map, there are, I forget what I said in here, there are, I think, 7 single-family homes in the ADU zone. So my suggested amendment to you is to change the wording that currently says one accessory dwelling unit may be located on a lot with a single-family detached dwelling in the low-density residential or medium-density residential zones to one accessory dwelling unit may be located on a lot with a single-family detached dwelling in a residential zone. So any residential zone with a detached single-family home could have an ADU. I've also, you may recall that 2 years ago when we were working on, or last year when we were working on the residential zoning standards, that there are 2 standards in our ADU code that state law now says we may not do. One requires that either the principal unit or the ADU be owner-occupied. The other requires an additional off-street parking space. And our proposed residential zoning units would have deleted those. While we're making this change, I suggest we get rid of those 2 paragraphs as well. And that's the suggested code amendment that I have for you.
Discussion?
I think my discussion then would be if it's high density, and really the highest best use as far as our zoning would be to have more than one dwelling, do we want to limit, the verbiage is good just to change it to residential, but in the long run, wouldn't we want high density to have more than one single family anyway? Or more than 2? essentially.
Yeah, yes, but,
Okay?
or yes, and,
Okay.
as my therapist is teaching me to say now. We don't allow single-family dwellings in the high-density zone. So even if we had a piece of vacant high-density land, and someone wanted to come in and build, let's say it was an acre, and we require a minimum of 13 units per acre, someone wanted to build 13 detached single-family dwellings on this acre, our code today doesn't allow that to happen. So the only way, if there is an existing detached single-family home, of which we've got 6 or 7 around the city, either those people have what they have today, and when they're, quote, tired of it, they tear it down and build an apartment building. Or we say, yes, you can have your kid move in a tiny house in the backyard.
That's good.
I mean,
That solves that. I just didn't want to limit it to that, but you're right. A new application wouldn't have that anyway.
Right, right. And we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna see those single-family homes on teeny little lots get turned into an apartment complex. The real answer is we should probably, unless they're surrounded by apartment complexes or property that's likely to be built into apartment complexes,
Yeah.
really the zone map should be changed so that they go into one of the other residential zones.
Okay.
But that's a bigger process also.
So this change would just apply to the 7 at this time, and it doesn't apply to multiple dwellings, triplexes, duplexes?
Correct.
Yeah. okay.
Correct, because the language in the existing language in the code that remains unchanged is an ADU may be located on a lot with a single-family detached dwelling.
Okay.
So other discussion?
Kind of shoots me down. I was all set to go here.
So do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the word changes to the code. Those in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I will set up do the publicity, et cetera, legal notices for a public hearing at your November meeting, and then we can forward this on to council.
Good.
The other item I have for you is traditionally, the Planning Commission has not had a December meeting. I've been working with a party for several months, actually for almost a year, who is preparing an application for site plan review. The consultant contacted me about a week and a half ago saying he thinks he'll have the package ready to submit the second week of November. And I said, oh, that's going to be too late for the November meeting. We usually don't hold a December meeting. That means you're not going to get before the Planning Commission until January 31st. He said, what the business, not that it really should matter, but the business is a wildfire fighting contracting company who's going to just set up a yard for their employees to come. They'll have stuff stored there. Their vehicles will be stored there. The firefighters will come, leave their vehicles there, go out in the company vehicle. And they're very concerned that if they don't get before you until January 31st, they won't be able to have their site ready for the beginning of fire season next year.
So I guess my question would be, when can we meet the notice, the right notice, can we have an earlier December meeting
You
instead
could,
of?
you could have a meeting on December, your choices are skip the December meeting, and oh well to these people, they'll deal with it. You could meet on December 13th, which would be 2 weeks earlier than you would normally be meeting, and it would be 2 weeks, actually it would be 2 weeks after your November meeting. Or you could hold it on January 10th instead of January 31st, so that would be 3 weeks earlier than you would normally be meeting. Then making, they would only have to wait till January 10th instead of having to wait until January 31st, so that would give them an additional 3 weeks.
I don't have anything. going on.
Or meet on the 27th.
Right.
I don't, it depends on what your all personal schedules are.
The
I'm
27th.
available.
27th is the date that the meeting would normally
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that's the other option, is just meet on your regular last Monday of the month. It all depends on what you all are doing that week, that holiday week.
Well, how close are they to having the information to you?
I was told that he hopes to have it submitted to me the second week of November. That's his plan.
And my guess is as soon as Dan tells him that we're agreeable to having a meeting, he'll probably get on the stick and
Right.
maybe even get it in earlier.
So at this point, I'm free the 13th or the 27th. My preference probably would be to do it earlier than later, just because it gets busy at our place
Yeah.
around that time.
So
Being the
where are you,
pastor's wife.
Jackie, with all of this? You,
Well, I may or may not be here, so if I am, I'll be open to anything. If I'm not, I won't be here, so it won't matter.
so,
Right.
meaning moving away? Yeah.
Yeah. Richard, you didn't hear the pre-meeting gossip, which is that Jackie has a house under contract that's outside of the city limits
Oh.
of Stayton, and it may be, by the time of this next meeting, she's no longer a Stayton resident.
Oh. Well, I'm amicable to this, whatever the rest of the people want.
So I think the 13th would be good.
Yeah, if he can do it by the 13th, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I need 20 days' notice, so the 13/7, that would be like, that gives me to like the 24th, I think. I'd have to look at a calendar to be sure, but 23rd, 24th.
Yeah.
would that, so if they get the application in by the 20th, then I can get that notice out in time for the 13th.
Well, and it's going to be a 5-minute meeting probably too. It's not like going to
Who knows?
be, okay.
I think, it'll be a public hearing.
Yeah, okay.
Depends on how well their plan is prepared.
It'll take me more than 5 minutes to read the preamble,
Read
so,
read the opening statement.
so. But yes, the 13th sounds
Okay.
like a swell date,
All right.
12/13.
If that's a consensus, at least of the
Yes,
three of
right.
you that are likely to still be Stayton residents, then we'll go with that. Okay, super.
And the three of us would constitute a quorum if
Yes.
Dixie isn't
Yes.
able to be here,
Dixie's
because
not
we don't know where
available,
she's
and-
at with all
and
this.
Jackie's no longer with us.
Mhm.
And- Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you. Just as I said earlier, the update on, you may recall that in January of 19, you made a recommendation to the city council regarding the annexation of property on Fern Ridge Road from our friend, Mr. Gene Jones, who, when he first walked into you, wanted to do an RV park. And then he came in saying that he wanted to do a mobile home park. Well, in March of 20, he walked into the city council hearing and said, nope, I don't want to do a mobile home park. Now I want to do apartments. please zone me high density for apartments. The city council continued that hearing so he could submit a concept plan, and then the pandemic hit, so they held their public hearing. They finally continued the public hearing on the 11th of October, 2 weeks ago, and there was a 2-2 vote to approve the annexation and to assign medium-density zoning, which is what you had recommended, thinking that he wanted to do a mobile home park, and that was the appropriate zoning, and what I had recommended to them even after he came in and asked for high-density zoning. There were 7 or 8 people who all testified either don't do high-density or don't annex it. Following the 2-2 vote, the mayor broke the tie, voting in favor. But because it was not a unanimous vote, it needed to come back for a second consideration. So that happened last Monday night. And that hearing went on till about 10 o'clock. It was 11 before I left here because they had other business afterwards. They then discussed it for another hour to an hour and a half last week. And the end result was a motion to reopen the hearing. And because their agenda is set far enough in advance and was already pretty busy, that new hearing will be on December 6th. And the rub for a couple of counselors, and I can understand where they were coming from, is that our code says that he needs to submit a conceptual plan of what he wants to do, and then the code says that when the property is developed, it needs to be substantially compliant with that conceptual plan. So you don't walk in and say, I want to do 50 single-family homes, get annexed, and then submit an application for 200 duplexes. The rub is that he came in saying, I want to do an apartment complex, submitted a plan of that, but then they were going to impose zoning on him that would not allow that. So he needs to come in now with a sketch of what he thinks he wants to do under medium-density zoning. Because that would have been after the record closed, they need to reopen the hearing, and so that's where we sit. So December 13th, when we reconvene, I should be able to clue you in as to at least what happened the Monday night before.
How does that even work with an apartment? I know that property was a little bit confined in that it has the wetland behind it, and does it even work?
It could have worked. I think it would have been very difficult
Yeah.
to do and get as many units as an apartment complex, even if it was zoned high density.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have been able to get as many units in as he
Hopes.
thinks he wants.
Yeah.
The reality is, and I stressed this to the council several times on both the 11th and the 18th, is that regardless of what they zone it as, low density, medium density, high density, apartments can be built there because there are wetlands on the property. Therefore, our code says it has to be developed as a master plan development, even if it's just going to be single-family dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
And as a master plan development, any housing type can be built. The master plan development process says you get X housing units, and if you want to put them all in multifamily buildings, you can. So I think we're likely to see some multifamily. I'm meeting with his consultants from Multitech on Wednesday afternoon, and we'll see what they have in mind. I think regardless of the zoning, that property lends itself to a mix of housing types. It's big enough. It's got sort of the natural barriers that you could separate single family You could do what Roger Roberts did and put duplexes on each of the corner lots, however you lay it out. There'll be a number of corners, intersections. And we'll see what he comes up with.
I think that meeting would be changed from medium density to high density. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision.
It had to be. His consultants pulled me over at, 6:58 that evening in the hearing room to say, you're not going to believe this, but. So he must have sprung it on them shortly before.
Just trying to figure out the highest and best use for that property, essentially. What could they possibly make it?
Yeah.
Or do they just try to anything that might work out?
Yeah. And I don't know what Mr. Jones's capacity to be a developer
Sure.
is to begin with.
Right.
And
Well, multi-tech will at least be there for the engineering part
Yeah.
of it.
yeah,
Well, if they know about it ahead of time,
right.
I mean,
point.
if he's pulling stuff like that, I'm surprised he even still has multi-tech working for him.
It's a volatile issue for a neighborhood.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Well, even
it's-
some of the people across Fern Ridge, on this side of Fern Ridge
Yeah.
are against it.
Yeah, I think, personally, it would have been a good spot for a mobile home. I mean, really, there's not a whole lot you could do with the property, and we need housing. I think you can make it nice, but I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
What's going on with Pine?
The last I heard, which is months and months ago, they had hired some designers, engineers, and I haven't heard anything
Since then,
since
okay.
then.
And I didn't hear that we got a new city manager, so somehow I missed that memo.
Well,
Yeah.
you don't have a new
Okay.
city manager.
We just left for
But-
Sherwood.
But Keith left,
Okay.
maybe a month ago already?
Okay, yeah, somehow I missed it. It's like,
Yeah,
what? Okay,
yeah.
Sherwood,
Sherwood.
Sherwood, yeah.
close.
And at next Monday's city council meeting, staff will be making a recommendation to the council on hiring a recruitment firm to
Oh.
coordinate the search for his replacement. No, we did not. And we should have.
There you go.
The what property?
The one that had the oak tree that we.
I don't know. They have received engineering approval of the street construction they need to do and utility construction. And are otherwise ready to start construction, but need to complete a development agreement because we'll be reimbursing them, so that agreement spells out what they're paying for, what we're paying for. And back in the spring, I was told they were all ready to go, but for coming in and signing the paperwork. So I have no idea what's up with that.
I saw your email about the brown house, and you made some accommodations there. First concern, if I recall correctly, was the parking off the street, a big issue with it.
They say, and I don't doubt them, they say they have no money to do any construction work there. My March order required them to have 10 parking spaces, at least one of which needed to be an ADA accessible space and on-site, not on the street. And my order from Friday includes that requirement. Well, includes the requirement that either they have an ADA space on site or that they demonstrate that if I'm in a wheelchair across the street, that I've got adequate ADA ramps to be able to get from that parking space to their door in my wheelchair, which I don't think they'll be able to do. I think. So, the other project, as you may recall, we annexed 10 acres of land at the corner of Shaft and Golf Club last year, and partition, you approved a partitioning. That partition finally got recorded late September. It took forever. The surveyor's office kept rejecting it for one reason or another. And it was all stuff that we in the office and the applicant surveyor kept going, what? We always do this. But anyway, it finally got done, and next month you will be holding a public hearing on a 100-unit apartment complex on the north parcel,
Right.
not the corner.
The American Common is being
Yeah, those will, yeah, I mean, they're part of the development. I mean, so did we. So, yeah, that will be part of the development.
Was that the roundabout spot?
Yeah.
Yes,
Cool.
that's all I've got for you
And-
for
and-
updates.
And where are we with the roundabout?
The roundabout, we are almost finished with the design work. So they have laid out how much right-of-way we will need. They have identified wetlands that turned out to be there
Yeah.
within the right-of-way. They've got the design. I don't know what's left to do to consider that design and engineering to be completed, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
With the idea that we'll have a set of plans on the shelf, ready to go for when Congress passes the infrastructure bill and there's all types of money flowing that we can afford to do it.
So anything else?
Our church just put an offer and got it accepted on the property at the corner there that we need for access to off of Third. On Third there, right next to Weddles.
Is it a vacant piece?
It's got a single-family house on it.
Oh.
So which we'll hopefully rent out for a while, then probably move, so we can access and do something with our back property, because
Right,
we're landlocked
right,
right there with
right.
Weddles.
Right.
So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, okay. Good.
So should we adjourn? We're adjourned. Yeah.
Well, it's all Ralph's idea, but you're welcome.